Hello, Kimball Creek partners and friends. So today, Dean and I wanted to talk about getting a second opinion from another financial advisor. We'll often have clients come to us, prospective clients, friends, and they'll say, hey, we've had this financial advisor for so many years.
Can you take a look?
What?
Can you take a look at it?
Can you take
I don't
a
really
look?
know what I have. Can you take a look at it?
No, exactly, right?
Yeah,
It's
all the time.
sometimes they'll be getting ready for retirement. They just want to be sure that everything's nailed down and everything's ship shape. So we kind of went through and we made a list of, what does a second opinion look like? And we wanted to go through that now. So Dean, what's the first thing you look at? When somebody comes, says, give me your opinion, what's the first thing you look for?
Well, I think the first thing that you've got to look at is how much risk is in the portfolio, and is it the appropriate amount for the client? That's like number one. And one of the problems that we had, I just had a conversation the other day with someone who was telling me about the individual who put 100% of their IRA in one stock last year, and it's up fivefold. And so they've made all this money. And you know what? That happens. And everyone listening to this probably has somebody they know that bought, pick one of the hot tech names. In hindsight, that sounds smart, but just because somebody wins the lottery doesn't mean that's a good strategy for you. And so we want to look at how can we be consistent, or at least give ourselves, a data-driven reason for being where we're at.
Well, and I think the word you used, appropriate risk, is really important, right? Because the amount of risk that you're taking in your portfolio changes over time. So especially if you're getting close to retirement, maybe you were heavy in a certain sector that performed really well for you. You took a lot of risk. Well, now that you're moving towards those assets being able to provide you an income, that risk needs to be adjusted. And making sure that happens, sometimes if you're not being active with that, you don't make that transition until you get hurt.
Well, and another example of that risk that I think is really important, there used to be this kind of ratio that was thrown around years ago in financial planning, that you took your age and subtracted from 100.
Right.
And that's, what's left over is how much equity exposure you should have.
Right.
Well, the problem with that is, let's say you're a 25-year-old and you inherit a one-time lump sum.
Right.
But you really have no other way of replacing that. You don't have savings, that's your income. Well, that's a much different portfolio than a 35-year-old recently graduated doctor that has a high income and really is going to live off a percentage of his income or her income and just put the rest away. They can do that 70% or 80% equities and be well within their risk tolerance, whereas that individual who needs that money for income really isn't appropriate. They'd be in trouble if you had a 50% drawdown in the stock market.
Yeah, I know that was too much risk or inappropriate risk. That just jumped to both of our minds when we started thinking about second opinions. That's really the first thing that we look for. So the second, you say, okay, like risk maybe seems appropriate. What's the next thing that you're kind of looking for when evaluating a portfolio?
Well, one of the common themes that I've seen with people is they think they're diversified and they're not. I'll call it spaghetti diversification.
Okay.
Every year they saw a new fund in U.S. News or whatever, and they like spaghetti. My mom taught me you throw it against the wall, and the one that sticks is done. Okay. So maybe so they buy these funds, and so they might have. I reviewed a portfolio one time. It had 50 different mutual funds. And it might have been 52. It was a lot of funds.
That's a lot.
And I'm sure this individual felt that they were diversified, but when we did a little deeper dive, we realized that the majority of those funds were 90 to 95% correlated to each other because they all held the same things. They had different names, and they were different, like American funds or Vanguard funds. And when you looked at what was inside them, it was all the same stocks. Yeah. And so they weren't getting that diversification they thought they were. They were just in a whole pile of stocks that were the same names.
Well, and that spaghetti diversification can often come as you accumulate things over the years, right?
Yeah.
You're putting in some money one year, you buy something, you put in some money the next year, you buy something different. And going into retirement or when you're really trying to clean up, you're trying to get a unified strategy going on so that each one of your funds is serving a purpose and not replacing the other fund or overlapping in that. And so I think that's a great point. I like that spaghetti diversification. So number 3, we had down yesterday's ideas for tomorrow's market. What can you elaborate on what that is?
Well, that's a great one. So every mutual fund prospectus, right? And we've all seen the commercial. Past performance is no guarantee of future results.
Yeah.
Right. That disclaimer's everywhere. We use it, so it's in our material.
Yeah.
We have to, but it's not comical. It's sad, but most people just totally forget about that when they look at their funds. Think about the last time you looked at your 401k. You're at work. How did you pick the funds that you're in? Well, you probably went to the past performance and said, oh, look, this one was up 15% a year for the last 10 years. The problem with that strategy is you got to understand where that return came from and what does the fund invest in. I'll give you an example. Funds that were invested in oil, when oil corrected pretty severely in this most recent drawdown from COVID, as we thought about slowdown, oil prices, tanked, no pun intended. But, all those stocks got hammered. And so what looked like this great dividend-paying basket of stocks, because they've had a pretty good run, all of a sudden you got hammered.
Right.
So your past performance, if you'd have picked that way, you said, oh, these look great. They're paying me an 8-10% dividend on some of the master limited partnerships, and it looked really great, right up until they dropped in half.
Yeah.
And then it didn't look so great. So it's taking a look at your portfolio and saying, okay, we know where the returns came from, but what do we expect going forward? Are we at a high in certain areas? Or what are our concerns? And then positioning that portfolio, oftentimes in funds that look like they've had horrible performance.
Right. I know that when we talk about and when we're looking at funds, so our screening criteria, we're looking at 1, 5, 10, and 20-year time points kind of thing. Well, a fund that performed really well over the 5, the 10, and the 20 years, but maybe got clocked last year. I know that we always get so excited when we find that, right?
That's great.
Because that's the truly on sale that they talk about, right?
Exactly.
But it's hard to do, and it's hard to know going forward.
Well, versus the fund where their performance all came in the last 2 years, say.
Right.
And so the 2-year number makes it look like they have a great 10-year number, but it really isn't. It's
Well, you at least have to ask yourself, was
Why?
it because they were good and that's what's going to happen tomorrow, or was it because there was a shutdown and oil tanked, or like whatever it is, right? Or his electric car is going to displace oil, and you have to consider those things.
Yep.
So number 4, expenses and tax efficiency. This might be one of the more straightforward ways to look at comparing portfolios.
Yes, and everybody knows, right? A penny saved is a penny earned, right? We know that, and so we take a very hard look at what it costs for our client portfolios. We do exhaustive surveys. Are we in the right share classes? What does it cost? Because there's definitely funds that have higher internal expenses.
Right.
And so we do a pretty deep dive on that, and we can help you see what your actual expenses are for the fund, not just what you pay an advisor, but what you might have inside of some of those different funds. So that's one area that you can probably look some of that up, but it might be easier for us to put it on our systems and do a screen.
And I think we talk about this. It's okay. I mean, every fund's going to have some expense. They all do. And it's okay to pay more for an active manager or for some performance, but you got to make sure you're getting performance, and that there isn't a less expensive option that could be giving you the same thing. And we spend a lot of time debating that internally.
We're looking for value.
Yeah.
Right, and that's important. The other thing that's I think people are getting a little more aware of, but it's tax efficiency. And understanding where and what types of accounts, certain investments, it's better to have. For example, in that Roth that we talked about, Or in a traditional IRA, you might not care about certain tax efficiencies. You just want total return. But maybe in a taxable account for someone with a very high income right now, you want to be careful that you don't have, you know, over trading or, you know, very active managers that are just generating a lot of short-term gains. The number might look more attractive, but on a risk, not risk adjusted, but on a expense adjusted basis and tax adjusted. So we take that into consideration in a second look.
Yeah, I mean, I think making sure that, you know, there just isn't any simple way that you could be saving some percentage points, right? I mean, sometimes, you know, it's hard to judge that, but we can kind of put that through some software. We get a sense very quickly if at least a portfolio is being efficient.
I'd say just kind of in summary for me, the point I would look at is, you know, every portfolio is going to be a little different. We customize to our clients, and I think most good advisors do that. And again, Brock and I, we've talked about this. We don't view good advisors as our competition. Right. If you have a great advisor, we're happy to tell you, hey, this is a quality portfolio. This looks good. Because there's plenty of people that aren't getting the help they need. That's who we're really out there trying to help. So we're happy to do that. The second opinion is something we do. If you don't have an existing relationship with us, we do that on a flat fee. So if you just want us to do a deep dive, we're happy to do that. If you have a relationship, that's just part of what we do. And so, you know, if you've got family or friends, we'll take care of those too.
Yeah. We're always here to help, and we really encourage you, especially if you're approaching a milestone or just if you feel you're kind of ready to tighten everything up, to reach out to us, and we'll take a look and we'll make sure that you're getting the help you need.